Hello everyone, and welcome to the History and Practice Introductory Lecture. My name is Lloyd Bowen. You may remember me from such presentations as Assessment Guidance Part 1 and of course this blockbuster sequel, Assessment Guidance Part 2. I'm the convener of this module, HS 1119 History and Practice, Questions, Frameworks and Audiences. And this introductory lecture is designed to give you some information about the module, what's coming at you in the next semester, how the module is going to be set up, what sort of things you can expect, how teaching is going to be organized, what kind of skills, what kind of abilities we are looking to develop through you guys, and why this module, I guess, is compulsory for history students. Hopefully, you'll get a sense at the end as to why that's so and what we are looking to get, not just out of this module, but for this module to apply to all your other history courses too. First, a bit about myself. Who am I? As I said, I'm Lloyd Bowen. I work on early modern British and Welsh history, which is to say the history of Britain and Wales in the 16th and the 17th centuries. Hopefully, as you can see on this slide, I published a book this year called Anatomy of a Duel, which is an inside look at the best documented duel of the early modern period, which occurred on the 21st of August 1610 at Highgate, just outside London, between two young gentlemen, in which one was killed. I also work on the major project, which is just below the cover of the book there, to digitize petitions from maimed soldiers and widows who requested financial support from the authorities in the aftermath of the British Civil Wars of the mid-17th century. This website gathers together all of those petitions from right across the country, digitizes them, and also makes them searchable as well, and provides transcripts. Have a look if you like. So, as I said, I'm the module convener of HS 1119. I also teach on the Renaissance, Reformation and Revolution course. I also teach on the British Civil Wars, hence the Civil Wars petitions, and on the political culture of the early modern gentry, hence the duelling. I was one of those involved in the original creation and design of this module many, many moons ago, and it was called something slightly different. So it's got a place quite close to my heart, and I like the module and I like to see people do well in it. I think that this module is very important. Why is that? Well, I think history is important. And I think all of our history students need to do this module for the good reason that it gives you the kind of training, the kind of skills that you need to succeed in a history degree. It also stems from the fact that, history is an important subject within our culture. This module is rather different from the other ones that you'll take in your history degree. And in history in the first year, indeed. It asks the question, what is history? And why do we study it? And how do we study it better? How do we make that transition from school into university study? It comes from a place that is certain that history is a crucial discipline in modern society, because history, as I hope this module will help you understand, is a way of critical thinking, as much as it is about the accumulation of knowledge about a political subject, like the First World War or the Avignon Papacy or something. So I think there's a crucial difference between what the man or woman in the street thinks what history is, and what a history graduate, hopefully, an undergraduate becoming a history graduate, also understands what history is about. I think for your ordinary man or woman, they see history as an accumulation of facts, an accumulation of information, and details about a particular thing that happened in the past, whether that's, the American Civil War, the Viking invasions, or whatever it might be. What I hope this course will help you to understand is that history is actually as much about the way in which you can scrutinize bodies of evidence and of opinion, of scholarly literatures that have been built up around subjects, as much as it is about just simply one thing after another. So it's about critical appraisal. It's about being able to pick things apart and see what works and what doesn't. it's a way of thinking. It's a mode of understanding the world, and I think that's why history graduates are good in terms of employability and so on. That they are able to make connections and research and analyze and have skills that allow them to succeed in other jobs and disciplines that require those sorts of skills, which are many, of course. Just going to have a slip of tea. So it's a critical cast of mine, but it's also an original one and a creative one, because what we're interested in our history modules is about you coming up with your own ideas about a subject. So it's not simply about what happened and coming to an absolute definitive affirmation about this happened. It's rather about interpreting how this thing happened, how we can understand it better, how it casts light on other parts of society, and about explaining things, explaining why this thing happened, and then being able to make a defensible argument about your interpretation of that event that stands up to scrutiny. This course also arises from our conviction that many of our current problems, our current situations, are historical in their nature, their origins, and in their capacity to be historically scrutinized. So I think there's a misunderstanding somehow by, say, doing a course on medieval history. You think that's somehow irrelevant to the modern world. In fact, we're doing a course in medieval history or history in practice. What it allows you to do is to become a critical citizen. It allows you and endows you with the capacity to understand how some of our current problems arise from historical origins, but also it allows you with and endows you with the faculties to analyze, critique, and pick apart the current situations in which you find yourselves. It allows you to become critical thinkers. I was thinking in this respect that the current problem all around us at present, a global pandemic, is one that's perhaps difficult to scrutinize in an historical framework. Well, you know, on closer sort of analysis, that's not true. I mean, you know, you get a small sort of conversation piece as we've got here about, you know, coronavirus and the Spanish flu. How we can understand and learn from the way that previous societies have responded to plagues, pandemics, to great societal challenges and so on is important. For example, I was listening to a podcast the other day, which was really fascinating, and I also read the book on which it was based by Michael Lewis about the pandemic, which told me that the best American responses, which of course Trump didn't follow, but the essential American responses about social distancing, about letting people have lockdowns and things like that, those were devised in the late 90s, early 2000s by individuals, epidemiologists and so on, confronting a new pandemic, the H1N1 pandemic of that period, going back and looking at what happened in the flu of 1918-19 and learning historical lessons from that to implement in today's society. That's where they came up with the idea, was historical scrutiny. So there's deeper levels to this as well. You know, some of our responses to the pandemic are conditioned by historical reflexes. Some people think that the entire power of the state needs to be brought upon the problem still. Others think that what we need to do is to go out and let the private sector take control of things. These emerge from historical party positions, of course. So this module aims to help you to do this kind of critical thinking. It tries to assist you in taking not just historical debates, but contemporary debates, contemporary ideas in the modern world, and to see how they are historically constructed. So this module then thinks about history in a slightly different way to some of the histories that you might have been exposed to in school, for example. Here, I'm hopefully going to be capturing two screens, which I can flip between on this presentation. We shall see. Could be a disaster. At the heart of the module is an attempt to understand a bit better ideas about disagreement and argument. And that there's a crucial difference between sort of information, the Battle of Hastings happened in 1066, and an argument on the other. The Battle of Hastings is actually a product of Norman power politics and Saxon weakness. It's an argument. What we want you to principally be scrutinizing and to be thinking about is disputation and difference in historical scholarship. Although you need to get your facts straight, of course, you can't say, the Battle of Hastings took place in 1032 or whatever. You need to have information. In school, I guess perhaps there was rather more emphasis on information and knowledge about a subject, although I'm sure you did touch on differences and arguments and interpretations between historians. Perhaps it was more knowledge about the subject that came to the forefront nonetheless. On this module, as you'll see, we're not going to look at one particular historical period. Rather, we're going to do a number of areas in history that are subject to critical scrutiny. So what we want to do is give you the skills that you can apply to your courses in medieval, early modern, and modern histories. So History in Practice will put forward a number of case studies from different periods, from thinking about how Dunkirk is discussed on the popular media and the BBC, to what do we make of reports of a woman giving birth to rabbits in 18th century England. We're putting these very different things side by side to help you understand how historians, no matter what they're talking about, put argument, debate, difference, sources and interpretation at the forefront of what they do. So why historians differ? That's at the forefront of your thinking. What we're trying to do on your degree scheme, whether you're a joint or a single honours history student, is to make you a critical citizen, critical thinker. And part of being able to do that is to help you understand and to get to grips with the differences that you'll see in the scholarship around you. And then ultimately, hopefully, by the time you're in your second and your third years, you will be able actually to contribute to that scholarship, perhaps by writing a dissertation of your own, making genuinely original research in which you put forward a thesis, an idea, a contribution that hasn't been made before, supported by historical evidence that you've gone out and found. We know you can do that, and you will be able to do that, no matter how uncertain you feel at present about your studies and your capacity to undertake them. So this is the foundation module that helps put talking about historical disagreement at the heart of what you should be thinking about. So we'll be talking about these disagreements, where they come from, how they occur, and crucially, how we analyse and interpret them better to make you into a better historian, a better subject of society, a better citizen. I've got a funny chest thing going on, so forgive the coughs. So on this module, we're going to be exploring some of the fundamental principles which underwrite all historical study and practice, all historical writing. We're going to be looking to help you develop the skills necessary to practice history and to enable you to assess the reasons for historical agreement and disagreement, and ultimately participate in historical debates yourself. One of the tools you'll need to get to grips with right at the start of the module is the handbook and with Learning Central. Okay. I'm going to move to this screen, I hope. This is the landing page for Learning Central. You will see that a student preview mode is on here. And you'll see several links down the side which are important for you to be aware of. Okay? These will be populated a little bit more. For example, your seminar groups will be popping up here under the seminars section. And you will also see that there will be a module schedule that will pop up here, but I want to just bring your attention to the fact that you can get hold of the handbook here and download it. Okay. You'll also find here, I'll just mention that there is lecture reading, there is seminar reading, and there are the reading lists for, just see if this actually comes up. Sometimes student mode doesn't let it. Problematic. Sorry. Take a look at the handbook. You can download the handbook from here. And it should pop up really quickly. Only semi-quickly. I wonder if I'll be able to edit this out. Okay. So here's the handbook. Um, you're going to get a handbook for each of your modules, and it's your roadmap for what you're expected to do on that module. And I want to put right at the forefront of your mind the idea that you go to the handbook for information. It's your first port of call when you've got a question about something. Be aware before you email anybody that the answer is usually in the damn handbook. So take a look at the handbook first, okay? I'll go over quickly how part of the semester is organised in a moment. But if you scroll down here to part of the handbook, which is that roadmap, flick through that quite quickly. You come to the learning objectives on the module. It's quite important. It tells you what the module is trying to get you to learn and understand. Take a moment and have a look at that. So these are the things you're going to do, and this is the teaching program that you're going to be encountering. So one of the things you're going to need to do after having listened to the lecture today is to read the first part of this handbook. Read the first 11 pages at the very least. That's a requirement, okay? It's what you have to have done. What you need to do as well is you need to download it. You need to have it accessible on your laptop, the handbook. You need to have it on a tablet, on your phone, whatever it might be. We can track this, so I expect shortly after this lecture has gone out to see 200 plus downloads, because we can track it, of this handbook being obtained by yourselves, okay? Module handbook gives you a lot of information, okay? One way of navigating through it, of course, is the Control F feature, the Find feature, or perhaps if you're on a MacBook, the Command F feature. If you want to find out, you know, what's my tutor's name is Helen Nicholson. How do I get in touch with her? If you put in Helen Nicholson as the search term, there is Professor Helen Nicholson's name, and there's her email address that you can drop her an email if you have a question or have a problem and you're in her seminar group, for example. Okay? If you want to find out something about assessments or something about essays, you know, if you put in something about, I know I'm going to do my assessed essay, for example, Netflix program. There you go. That's the assessed essay. So hopefully you'll be able to download the handbook and read through it rather more gracefully and successfully than I did. So if you want to know what's going on the teaching program, here you will find it. So week 1, there's an introductory lecture. Guess what? You're looking at it. Okay? And you'll find out here that in week 2 there is something called periodization in history writing, which again is with me. I'm sorry, there's quite a bit of me at the start of this. And you will find that that will be week 2, and that begins on the 11th. So I'll come back to the handbook in a moment. I just want to turn again to Learning Central. And I want to make you aware that this place is full of assistance and guidance. For example, one thing I'd like you to do early on is be aware that there are information sheets available for this module. You will see them here. For example, I want you to take a look early on at the information sheet on lectures and seminars. So if I click on that, it should download a document. I don't know whether this document is going to be able to come up quickly here on the screen for you. But it is an information sheet that gives you a short guide to lectures and seminars. It'll tell you what kind of teaching you're going to be exposed to and how to navigate it, how to get around it. There's also note-taking using the library, on essay writing, on style, searching and writing the essay and so on. There's a huge amount in these information sheets, which you will find right here on Learning Central. Also, be aware that part of the testing regime on this is to do with virtual learning environment tests, and you will find it here under the assessment and feedback area. There's also some supporting materials with library search, writing and referencing guides here, and so on. So please be aware that a crucial dimension of this is getting to know, finding your way around Learning Central. There's a lot of help there for you. I'm sure that you will Be aware that there are reading lists here, reading for lectures, and also seminar readings are available through here too. So, as it says in the module handbook, you're not going to be able to be successful in your course unless you know your way around A, the handbook, and B, Learning Central. Okay, so I mentioned, coming back to the PowerPoint, I mentioned that the aims of history and practice are to explore some of the fundamental principles underpinning historical disagreements, and we all want to introduce you to important frameworks which underpin professional historical writing. Now, frameworks is not a word to be afraid of. It can be slightly confusing, however. What we mean by frameworks, I guess, is simply approaches to things. So you can imagine a framework is constructed around the idea of how certain historical periods are set up. The medieval, the early modern, the modern being three kinds of periodization. Particular historical ways of thinking about the past come through thinking about, through that framework. I am an early modernist. I'm actually a 17th century specialist. Actually a British Civil War specialist, so you can kind of go down in granular forms in terms of periods there. You can also think about a framework as a type of place. I principally work on Britain, though I've actually been aware that that's a very contested idea at this time, particularly from Irish historians, for example. Do we include Ireland in Britain at this time? Should we? And I've also done a lot of work on Wales. Wales is not separate from England at this time in any way, shape or form. How do I maintain that that's a realistic way of cutting up the past by looking at Welsh history in this period, for example? So some people could be historians of modern Japan, early modern Ireland, of medieval Scandinavia. There's another sort of framework we can think about here, place and areas, nations. But we want you to think about organising ways of thinking as part of what you're doing when looking critically at histories. For example, I'm principally a political historian. Another colleague might be a social historian or a gender historian. Bit of a misogynist, though. So these are ways of thinking about how we divide the past up into bits. And that isn't a natural way of doing things or a neutral way of doing things. That certain problems arise from us making those initial decisions about what frameworks we look at, what decisions we make about what we're going to choose to consider in our studies, and that other people will come to different assessments by looking at different frameworks. In fact, we can see that in our earlier period, you're looking in the wrong place for certain origins, or how you can see disagreements coming out of selecting different frameworks. We also want to get you thinking about these. As I mentioned, developing core skills in practice in history and in history and practice. I'm going to break there for a moment, and I'll pick up this in part 2.